Wackadoo! Welcome to Dim Schnitzels. My name's Greg. I'm here week in, week out, celebrating retro video games, and I'm glad you're here celebrating as well. This week I'm taking a look at a game on the Nintendo Entertainment System. This one is Eight Eyes. Released many moons ago, all the way back in 1998. It was developed by Thinking Rabbit, who are probably best known for Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy, but this one is an action platformer with a bit of a Castlevania feel. But the name is kind of weird, and there's an apostrophe where there shouldn't be one, which annoys me, more than it probably should. Strangely, this is a post-apocalyptic title, although it doesn't really look like one. It really just looks a lot like its inspiration, which is clearly Castlevania, and that was released 2 years prior in 1986. But the devs are adamant that this is set in the future, so let's go with it. The 8 eyes in the title are actually 8 jewels, each of which was formed at the epicenter of a nuclear blast, which the player needs to collect. The jewels, not the nuclear blast. The first 7 can be collected in any order, and once done, they will provide access to the House of Ruth, the final stage. And with that last jewel recovered, the player can then place them on the altar of peace to summon some great old king or something to fix shit. It's weird. I didn't say it wasn't weird, but hey, it was the 1980s. Interestingly, the Japanese version didn't try to hide its inspiration. It was set in the Balkans in the 1800s. Amusingly, the main character in that game is called James Bond, the greatest swordsman in the world. LOL. Still, the Japanese version probably makes a whole lot more sense, I'm sure. This version, however, puts you in the shoes of a bloke named Oren, who has a pet falcon named Cutlass. I don't know. At least in the Japanese version, the bird was simply named Cutlass, which makes a whole lot more sense, you see? The levels play much the same. You make your way through the level to find the boss, you kill the boss, you acquire the jewel, you go on to the next stage. Players are armed with a sword for close-up melee action, but can also collect ranged weapons from fallen enemies. You can set Cutlass, or whatever, free to attack enemies and flick switches. In fact, the bird becomes quite key to the gameplay, which is actually pretty awesome, I've got to say. Now, this is an almost 40-year-old game at this point, so my next comment should be taken with a solid dose of perspective. The controls are shithouse. They're accurate enough for what you need to do, but certain actions are unclear, and with no tutorial, which was apparently the way back in ye olden times, and no instruction manual because I don't have one, I had a fair amount of trouble working out how to use ranged weapons and control my birdie, but once I did, things improved significantly. Stairs, unfortunately though, are a pain. You need to use them often, in every single stage, and when you do, and an enemy ultimately sees you, they always do, they'll make a beeline straight for you, and it's almost impossible to avoid damage. Of course, you actually do have quite a lot of life, so I guess it's about taking things slowly, but I don't like taking things slowly. Leroy Jenkins and then death, I say. Plus, I just don't get the layout of the levels. It's either a bit puzzly, and I'm not figuring out the puzzle, or the screens are randomized, and I honestly don't know which. I went down the ladder in Africa so many times, and I never figured out why sometimes I'd end up on the next screen, and sometimes I'd just end up on the same screen I just left, going down the same bloody stairs. It was probably the most frustrating thing, if that's not clear. Occasionally, I encountered some collision issues. Some enemies just couldn't be hit at all, some only in the head, other times you could hit them anywhere and they'd die. Most enemies took 1 or 2 hits before they died, but sometimes they only needed 1. Again, I'm not sure if this was due to a bug or bugs, or whether it was something I was doing wrong. I just don't know. And on top of all of this, some enemies are just a pain in the ass, like this little Jawa looking guy. He looks harmless and then boom, he jumps at you and you barely have any time to react, which is really frustrating, but I guess that's part of the challenge. Bosses are also quite difficult, as you'd expect, I guess. I only reached 1 of them during my playtime, and I was hardly able to damage him. I couldn't figure out the best way to approach the fight, and it was over before I had the chance. I did use ranged weapons, and they didn't seem to hurt him. Again, I'm not sure if this was intentional or something else, but it was definitely pretty annoying. Overall, it's a challenging game, but it's not a long game. And given enough time to learn the ropes a little better, I don't think it's actually all that challenging really, provided you take it slow, so I'll probably like to give it more of a go sometime. Well, we'll see if I get around to it. Interestingly, Eight Eyes received pretty middling reviews at the time of release, and although time has made players more appreciative, it wasn't impactful enough at the time to have more influence than its own inspiration, which was, again, very clearly, Castlevania. Although it was never remade, Pico Interactive did manage to snag the license and released it for purchase on Steam. Not long after, they also released it as part of Pico Interactive Volume 1 collection on Evercade, which is another platform I should probably show off on this channel someday. I did play this one on emulator, but I also grabbed a copy on Steam to support the license owner. It's less than 10 Aussie bucks. I do recommend you give it a shot. And that's it for another retrospective. If you have a suggestion for me to try, drop it in the comments below. I hope to see you again next time. Let's play all the games.